Welcome to Qt Widgets and more. In this episode, I'm gonna solve a mystery. Look at this stuff here. That's from Qt Creator. When I click on that AB button there, a dialog comes up. But how did they implement that? Is that API in QLineEdit these days? Is that, well, what is it? I'll investigate. So I had a pretty good idea what was going on. The button that showed up was likely a child of the lineedit, which is okay in Qt. The button will then be rendered inside the lineedit, but the lineedit will still not know about it. So I was a bit puzzled. How did they avoid that the text would actually just run underneath the button, which I observed it didn't. And it turned out that there was an API for that. And indeed it was just a button like that. The way that I found the source code for it was that I simply started up Gamma Ray, said that many times before, and clicked on the button, Control-Shift, click on the button to show the name of the button, the class name, and then I could easily grab in the source code of Qt Creator. So I thought, hey, in a previous episode, I created a file chooser for choosing files. So let me try and do this now with this track with a button inside. And it looks like this. So let me just show you the code running now. I have 3 file choosers here, and you can see when I click in, the button shows up, and when I click that button, the file chooser from Qt shows up. So what did I do? First of all, I created a simple button here that is a subclass of tool button, and all I did was for it to paint the items in there. Qt button actually has API called setIcon, but I couldn't figure out how to avoid it being completely opaque. I wanted, as you can see, I wanted the color of the lineedit to show through. So it was really just this outline here. And I had a transparent SVG, so I wanted that. So I thought, hey, I'll just paint it myself. Easy peasy. My file selector specified the mode, and the mode is this. Should it be file open, file save, or directory? And then I create my button. I hide it originally, and it'll be shown whenever I get focus in. I set the mode, and I connect that whenever the button is, after all, just the Qt button. Whenever it's clicked, it should call this choose file. But of course, up until this point, it'll be placed at position 0, 0, likely with the width and height of a default tool button. But even I'm using a paint in here, so what would be the default? I need to size it and place it myself, and I do that in the resize event. Whenever a resize event comes in, so that's a lineedit being resized, whenever that comes in, I will figure out what is the height. I will resize my button to being square with that size. I will move it to the right edge. That's where I dream of my good old QML days with anchor layouting, so I could just anchor it at the edge. But hey, I'll just move it to the edge here. And then here's the magic API, set text margins, specifying that the area in which the lineedit renders its text is from 0, 0, and I can't remember, margins must be 0 from the right side. That's at least what this whole thing is about, namely making sure that I reserve that size of my button for the text not to run under. And I call my lineedit resize event, and always whenever you overwrite an event, make sure that you call the superclass. Choosing the file looks like this here. There's not much new in that compared to what we saw previously. Set mode, not much new compared to what we saw previously. And then focus in and focus out event. That's where my button is shown and hidden again. And try for the fun of it yourself to remove this focus in event. I thought that it wouldn't do anything, but actually it does. So always remember to call the superclasses method. There might be one change in what you've seen before, namely the use of a lambda expression here. So I have this const qstring text. It's a set mode here. It's the text to be shown as a placeholder text. And I create a lambda expression here only to call it right away. And that is to avoid the case mode is file chooser, set placeholder text, choose file. If the mode is file save, set placeholder text. So I simply, this part here just returns me that Q string. It's a nifty little feature that I learned from our own C++, modern C++ training that we have in KDAP that I joined recently, and I like that quite a lot. So I was pretty happy about my code. I thought, hey, that's going to be a pretty nifty little Qt Widgets and More episode. People can learn about this trick of having widgets on top of other widgets, and they can take that code straight out of Qt Widgets and More and use it on their own. That's awesome. I sent my code for review, and the review comment that came back was, isn't that exactly what add action on the QLineEdit does? I was like, come on, I know QWidget add action, of course, but that sets up a context menu with all the actions that you add action to the QWidget. That's not what I want. I want that button there. It's like, no, could you please review the documentation for add action on QLineEdit? So it turned out that QLineEdit actually has a method called add action that specifies an action to be put at the end of the line edit or at the start of the line edit for exactly this purpose. So I tried writing the code or rewriting the code for that. Let me show you. So my file selector now creates an action down here. It has the icon specified here with the Q icon. The add action specifies that the action should be at the trailing position of the line edit. And if I just go here, you'll notice that that is actually add action of QLineEdit, not the add action that exists in QWidgets. And the rest of it is the same thing. I can run my application. Part 1 it says up there, so that's the previous one. Let me just change that over to part 2 and to run that. And you can see my button sits here again, and somehow I managed magically to solve the problem with the transparency. Maybe I don't know. I was drunk when I tried it previously. The button is always here, but actually I like it to always be there more than hiding away. If it was really paramount for me to hide away, I could always revert to the solution in part 1. There's also a validator on this. If I just move over here, you can see there is a validator, and that's just to show off and to satisfy whoever was reviewing, because now loading a file, I cannot write C://. Well, I can write it, but if I press enter here, it's not going to say file to load because the validator is not okay with this. I could say home blackie.zshrc. That's my C shell resource file, and press enter and it'll say, yeah, I can load that file. But something like this, nope, doesn't want to load that file. But that's a part of the validator that we had in here. And as always, I can press this button now and it brings up. So there you are, 2 different solutions to the same problem. And the beautiful of it is that you can take this file selector, pick it out of out of Qt Widgets and More here, and it's MIT licensed, so you can use it rather liberally in your own product. That's it for this episode of Qt Widgets and More. I hope that you learned a trick or two, and if nothing else, it's definitely much easier to just pick out the file chooser from my source code than write one yourself. I hope you enjoyed it. And by all means, do let me know your thoughts and do give me thumbs up, and do let me know if there's anything in Qt Widgets that you would like me to touch on. I might actually take you up on it. Until next time, have a great time. Thank you for watching yet another episode of Qt Widgets and More, but I have one more thing to tell you. On June 13th to 15th, KDAP is going to host a developer conference in Berlin, and I'll be there to collect all the beers that you owe me after all these fancy episodes. No, seriously, there's going to be lots of interesting topics, both on QL, which you might or might not be interested in, but at least you can dip your toes in what is that about and see if that makes sense for you, even on desktop. And there's going to be some very strong C++ presentations and much more. Go and check out the program, and well, I hope to see you there.